Hey, it's you, me, the increasingly loud fan on my desktop PC, and another conversation about lucha libre stuff. About this time of year, it's what, probably December 20th when you see this. Maybe I'll see it later. I'm just rambling already. About this time of year, it's a good time to do year in review. Look at all the great matches. Look at all the great wrestlers. Rank stuff. We love the rank stuff, and use that to look back at the year because it's December. Most wrestling's pretty much done by December. Everyone's had the big shows, or their big shows are coming up in January, and we're in a little quiet period. We in Lucha Libre world do not get that break. Just this week, we have the finals of the CML Grand Alternative Tournament, where they will try to make one or two of those of Penta Del Ring and Raider as future stars. We have coming up in about 9, 10 days, 8 days, whatever. We have AAA's running what they're kind of quietly promoting as their fourth Triple Mania, but not too loud because no one wants a fourth Triple Mania. With Vikingo versus Bandito and FTR on the show and other stuff on the show that may be good or may just be weird. And even like Big Lucha is joining in the Mexico holiday tradition of running on Christmas by running actually Bandito versus Vikingo again. I have no idea why they're running that twice, but it'll be good. Like these are actual match of the year candidate matches. Either a Vikingo Bandito match might be there. Like Fabi Apache is like a big news for showing up to CML. It does not because Lucha Libre is more family oriented in compared to U.S. wrestling and even Japanese wrestling. Christmas is a good season to keep running big shows. So, we're stuck behind the curve. I can't really do a match of the year stuff because it may all get blown up in a few days. What I could talk about instead is, the big trends of the year, the big stories of the year, because those we're probably not going to get some ground swelling thing in the next few days. And if we do, I will just delete this video and pretend it never happened. I think it's a great way of coping with this. I'm thinking of, the big picture stuff, not that show was really good or that wrestler had a few good matches. It's what did we see overall in the year about what were the themes, what were the things that what were the directions people and promotions took that they weren't taking before. Just trying to no one focuses more on the day-to-day of Lucha Libre stuff than me, probably to a very damaging degree, but I want to try to step back and take a look at the bigger picture about where are things going with all this, and where will they end up? Where might we see them in 2033? Back when there was more than one person actually covering Lucha Libre on a weekly basis, there was a bit I would do where I would just happen to post 6 important stories of the last few weeks, right when someone else was doing a podcast about Lucha Libre to give them content. And I thought, why not just steal that idea from myself and bring it back here? So what I got for you here is 6 ideas of what Lucha Libre, of big things, big themes, big patterns, in big trends in Lucha Libre for this year, and see if it'll make any sense. The biggest thing that happened in Lucha Libre this year was the explosion in U.S. visas of Mexican wrestlers being able to, through Mass Republic and U.S. partner promotions and Mexican promotions, were able to get clearance to travel freely from Mexico to the U.S., work in the U.S., pay whatever taxes, do whatever fees you had to do to get those visas. But they could do it without being hassled, without being worried about getting in trouble for doing it. And promoters could freely book them over the table, bring them in, and it opened up a lot of opportunities to people who, promoters wouldn't have thought of bringing in, or promoters wouldn't have taken the risk of bringing in, or wrestlers just didn't want, themselves don't want to get in trouble. One of the best running bits on the U.S. Indies this year have been the GCW Lucha Libre matches. And a lot of those have been helped out because there are people who wouldn't have been available 6-12 months ago who, because of Mass Republic and other people, were now able to come into the country and help fill out those matches. It's been something where it hasn't just been AAA wrestlers have come to the U.S. or CML wrestlers. It's been a wide array. It's been for shows that are as air quotes indie mainstream as GCW, and as like the Lucha Libre stuff that's on its own, like promotions I know of, like RGR, where they've brought in plenty of AAA talent over the last few years, or smaller promotions have brought in CML talent that would not have gotten chances without this being done. One of the more interesting parts about this is it's not, because it's Mass Republic helping people out and facilitating this, is not AAA visas where these guys are working through AAA to get these dates. These are guys who are contracted or have a close relationship generally with AAA or CML, or some indie guys too, but we'll just focus on those two, AAA and CML, who in Mexico they have that closer relationship, but now they have the freedom to work, to take their own dates on their own in the US, which gives them a little bit more choices in what they're doing in Mexico. Although they still have to keep in mind that, like, if you do something in the US that's going to annoy your company in Mexico, then you may pay a penalty that way. There's a lot of big factors from this. The most obvious one is, like, no one wants to talk about. No one, and I'm not going to go in detail there, but clearly there were people who were wrestling, who Mexican-based wrestlers who were wrestling in the U.S., who were trying to do it on less than work visa situations. Let's go with that. Even, like, people of bigger names than you may expect, or that people may have known. Now that's generally all cleared up, that people can take these bookings. People don't have to try to find sneaky ways to get to conceal that they're coming in for professional wrestling. They don't have to run the risk of being deported or barred for the country for many years. That's, like, alone, if that's a huge improvement. It's a weight lifted off a lot of people's shoulders. It's also, like, because the economic disparity between Mexico and U.S., especially in wrestling, it's opened up it's given people options for pay that they did not have before. It's made them realize that it's given them options back in Mexico where they may not have to take bookings as much, or they may be more choosy about where they get to work. And it's also given them opportunities to be seen by different people than you're going to be seen only in a Mexican wrestling show. There are different audiences that you get to work in front of, and that's something that would not have been possible had it just been without those visas. It's also like that different audiences also allows different people to break out. Like Commander, pictured up here, is a guy who had been coming on the last few years. Last year or so, going with Big Lucha, he has definitely improved and got steadier. And there's also other reasons for that that'll come up later. But, like, Commander having the great, amazing dives would be a big thing in the small Lucha Libre community of people, of international fans. But Commander doing it on a GCW show, or the guys at the Ric Flair show having their great match, is a bigger deal, and helps them break out more, because it's a different set of eyeballs that just, for various reasons, will not watch Lucha Libre unless it's presented in the U.S. and unless it's presented with some English commentary. And now they're getting those opportunities because of those visas. It's also, like, the better they do, the more willing people are going to get chances, or willing to give more people chances to try to create their own sort of matches. Like we saw with the Garden State Pro Wrestling, which I'm not even sure if they're still around, but when they were around, they were giving chances to guys like Elemental and Bendito of Big Lucha, because they had seen them on those Big Lucha shows, and they had seen how guys that they had worked with had done so well, and so that fueled the atmosphere. You can't fuel an atmosphere. That fueled a drive to bring in more, to look deeper and see if they could find their own guys that they could bring in. There still is a problem, though, because there were so many people who applied and successfully got for visas. That was a great story, but there are still, and it will probably forever be, a limited amount of space for these guys to find work. There are more Lucha Libre based promotions in the U.S. than I think people realize, but they're not going to be bringing in most of them are not going to be bringing in 5 guys per show. Most of the U.S. promotions, they'll bring in a few people, but they're not going to bring a lot. And even though it's been a success, there's going to be some people who got their visa and probably will not be able to use it as they hoped, and it's not a cheap expense to go through the process of getting this work visa. But it seems like for most people, it's been a gamble that's paid. For some people, it's a gamble that's paid off huge. Some people, just a few nice trips that they got to add, and some people probably have not been happy with how it's gone so far. But that's the limited availability problem, limited availability spots. The other issue is that because if everyone's so interested in going to the U.S., it kind of stigmatizes CML and AAA as kind of minor leagues, which I think to some extent to the rest of the world, they already see them as minor leagues, even though they draw bigger houses than most, like 99% of the promotions in the world. In theory, you would hope that the money in that these guys being able to find money in the U.S. would pressure these companies to be more competitive. But what we've seen in the past is that it just convinces them that what we've seen in the past is that these promotions feel that the wrestlers are more expendable and that they can find some replacements that are close, maybe not the same quality, but that they don't have to fight for these wrestlers. So you would hope that this would spur this on, but it may have a effect of making these promotions feel like they have even lesser stars because the real big stars are the ones that are going elsewhere. Another big story this year has been the CML booking differences. It's like, I don't want to overplay this because if you're not a person who watches this promotion every time and you just flip onto a random Friday show or a random Tuesday show, it's still going to feel a lot the same. They're still doing mostly 3-fall matches, even if they're doing less. It's mostly trios matches. You could throw a 2022 match on in a 2015, and in the 2015 match, and like the people who watch CML would be like immediately tell the difference. The people who just like casually tune into matches probably will not. But you can tell. But if you are paying attention, you can see that they're making subtle and important differences. The pre-pandemic, it seems like the pre-pandemic last couple of years, it really seemed like CML was coasting and content on what they had done before, and just like they were running the same formula over and over again. And since they've come back to having crowds, you can see that they're less taking for granted what they had, and they're trying to tweak things to make it better. And for a promotion that rarely changes, even the smallest tweaks can feel like a big deal. They've had a longer focus on some wrestlers and more like zeroed in focused. Like Atlantis Jr. was clearly the project this year from start to finish, from him starting the feud with Stuka all the way to the anniversary show. That was CML's biggest show of the year. Has in last few years felt, especially pre-pandemic, like something that they've kind of had maybe a couple months ahead of time. They've had kind of an idea of what they wanted to do, and this year it was like from the start of the year till that match and even past it, you can see that they had a big overarching plan and they stuck to it, and they kept following through. And that's a dedication that's not normal for them. They've had generally more attention on a fewer amount of wrestlers. If you're a person who watches the Friday night shows, there's a lot of people you just don't see on Friday night shows. The pattern before was that they tried to rotate. They tried to be, I guess, more socialist. They tried to give everyone an opportunity on all the different shows. There was a little bit more for the top guys, but they kind of like tried to spread out all the appearances, gave people opportunities to be on the shows with more people and more money for working those shows, no matter what their skill level or tenure or the popularity. And in this last year, they've really cut that down. There's a smaller group who gets to be on the biggest shows. They are generally the bigger stars of the high quality shows, high quality wrestlers. It doesn't always work out that way. There are people who, for reasons unexplained, do not turn up enough on those Friday shows. But they're like more focus on we've got to make these Friday shows better, and that means like not everyone gets the opportunity to be on the Friday shows. People can go months and months without being there or just not being on there at all, and that they're trying to build up certain people by putting them on those important shows week after week. That's like basic stuff for other promotions, but for CML that's a huge difference. They're trying to create more units and groups, so it's not just random random wrestlers thrown together for that show. There's still a lot of that, but there's a lot of this is the unit representing all the wrestlers from Guadalajara. This is the unit representing the guys from Puebla. These are all Volador students. These are all we got these twins, so we're going to find someone who has the same mask as them to put them together so they're a unit. It's more trying to make it's almost like making it easier to focus on fewer people by teaming them up and giving them less identity in the kind of a way, because they have the group identity instead of 4 different individual identities, for example. There's a increased attention to the special events, the Grand Prix, the anniversaries, the Dos Solenes, that those shows are built up as bigger. It's still an over-reliance on doing a special show each month, so you have a whole bunch of meaningless tournaments that no one can remember at the end of the year. But the Grand Prix has been developed into feeling a huge show, especially the men's one, and that's just a concept that's relatively new for them. It's 2022 saw more foreigners come into CML after being, obviously there was not that many coming in during COVID because of COVID, but also even the years before it, since Sho and Yo left, there was really since what's his name? Kuato left, was the last regular New Japan wrestler in there, and they were not, after the falling out with Ring of Honor, they weren't bringing in U.S. wrestlers either all that much, but they've, especially in the last few months, been making a focus of bringing in more foreign wrestlers, trying to make themselves a bigger international name. They're not the biggest U.S. names, unless you're a huge Matt Taven fan, but they're trying to handle the situation where they have a roster that's been intact for a long time by adding in new people to create some new matchups and to also get themselves a little bit more attention by including people who might have fan bases elsewhere. There's also I'm losing my voice already. Just overall, it feels like a better vibes of promotion. It's like there's more likely to have a great match. There's more likely to have a hot crowd than they were just 2 years ago. It's better energy because they're doing some new matches. I think this is a more 2021 story, but Mystico becoming Mystico again really helped the promotion, and you could tell when they start pushing him to the end of the tournament, and when the legend that plotted the tournament this year and had a mix up with Titan and Soberano and Temporero got in a bigger role. They've added new people to the top mix, and they've helped freshen up a little bit. And I think people are generally happier with the promotion who are watching the promotion. The big problem is that, the big problem right now is that there's not enough people watching the promotion, but we'll get to that in a second. I made up this chart just kind of to express what I was feeling about those better vibes. The last couple of years going into COVID, it's like they were getting by, but it was like the last year of Russian CML, the last years of Mystico 2. It was too much of the same guys doing the same stuff, and it felt like they were living off their past success and they were not bringing in new ideas. And like COVID was a real big reason why they went all the way down there in 2020, because they were running empty arenas and not doing much. But it was just a dispiriting promotion to watch. Even when they came back to having fans, it was just I can't express how unfun it was to watch the shows. They were tedious. It was the point where I was like, as a person who has bought like every single CML pay-per-view, I was I was as close as I've ever been just to be giving up, because the wrestlers weren't happy to be there. and the fans were kind of not happy to be there, and I wasn't happy to be watching it. So, like, even though I don't think it's been some great out of the world year for it this year, it's been so much better for CML this year that it just feels like knowing that, oh yeah, they're actually half decent and they can have some great matches sometimes. They can have a lot of boring stuff too, but they're watchable again in a way they have not been for since far before the pandemic. Oh, I have an empty bullet point there. That's interesting. The immediate future, though, for CML is that they need to continue to add new stars to the top mix, because they have the Atlantises, the Ultimate Guerreros, the Voladors, who have been there forever and haven't even gone away and come back like Mystico did. And they need to, I mean, they're just lacking the big feud to get people in week after week. Even when they do logical stuff or when they do steady stuff, they haven't done the one thing that's got people very excited about coming back in. Even when they have the great matches, like the Soberano Templario match, it's good for a week, but it's just like there's a momentum missing so far. And obviously they have their 90th anniversary show, which they've been promoting since the end of the 89th one. And it's clearly going to be a big deal for the promotion, but you don't see on paper what that great match is going to be. And if they're going to spend all year to it, they've got to find a match that people really, really want to see. And like the big part of CML's revenue right now is ticket sales to international and foreign fans, and that's helped a lot by COVID reducing, and that's also helped the better vibes because you have those tourists returning, you have people more excited to be at these shows. But to draw those fans in, you really need to have the product remain visible so people can see, oh yeah, it's a fun time, the fun experience to go to CML. And if CML is just behind paywalls or behind geo blocks and something that's posted a few weeks later on a YouTube channel that's not even promoted by the promotion, then you don't get that, you don't see how great a time it is to experience it live. As I talked, tomorrow CML is supposed to be back doing live streaming again for the first time since the pandemic at a regular basis. And hopefully I'll get that message out there. And you don't need like everyone to see the show for it to be a success, but you need enough people to spread that word of mouth that it's like when you come to Mexico City, it's definitely something you should do. That's there right now, but they need to maintain or increase that just to keep those fans coming in, because they aren't drawing the regular fans as they want to be. And there's a long-term problem there. It's like one of the draws of going to Arena Mexico is this authentic Mexico City experience. But if the Mexico City people aren't going to it and it just becomes too much tourists, then I think even the tourists will catch on that, oh yeah, this is more of a tourist trap than the actual thing that people do. So they need to make sure that they don't lose their normal people who live in the city who want to go see a fun time fans. And they can always stand to improve there. Story number 3 feeds into this. This year became the rise of Lucha Libre going behind various paywalls. Last decade, one of the ways that that Lucha Libre grew was that you could find the top Lucha Libre stuff pretty easily live and free on YouTube. CML streamed so much. AAA was on Twitch for a time. It was on Facebook for a time. Mas Lucha had all their big shows for free, streaming live or stream up on their channels soon after. And that's slowly changing. That was like a big difference from the wrestler world, because you could not do that with WWE. Indie promotions were very quickly, US indie promotions were very quick to go behind the paywall once they figured out streaming, and even before they really figured out streaming. Japanese promotions were never like that. They were just always a paid product. So that was an advantage Lucha Libre had over other styles of wrestling. And now they're going the way of those other places. AAA is on Fight when they're streaming live at all and at significant prices. CML is on Ticketmaster Live. Mas Lucha show is moving most of their big shows to streaming to a premium subscriber only base. There still is free stuff, but AAA and CML, like, they will put this stuff up on YouTube, and that'll be the end of it. They, like, if you know it's up, but CML never promotes their YouTube upload. AAA will maybe have a couple posts, and then they will move on to other things because they do not see, they see those as almost as obligations and stuff you're supposed to do, but they don't see them as a place to draw fans at this point. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. It seems like a missed opportunity. And I'm not really sure what they're doing instead is really working out for these groups. CML, I get those Ticketmaster Live every week. I think most weeks they are under 100 people are buying those shows. Probably some weeks far under 100 people. Mas Lucha, whenever I'm watching a live show, there are people watching with me. There's a decent amount, but I don't think they're doing huge numbers either. AAA, I think the Triple Mania shows do all right, but clearly the other shows did not. The shows on their show must have done terrible numbers because they did one of those and then they never came back. I don't know. I think they're making a little bit of extra money, but these are not things that are driving a big revenue for the promotions yet. And I'm not really sure there's a quick path there's a path from what they're doing to something that's going to bring in significant money. It's more they're doing it to do at this point, because this is what you do, is that you charge for your content, even if you don't make much money charging for your content. And there's also there's no a smaller group that said, okay, we're going to try some sort of premium plan, or we're going to try IWTV, or we're going to try Fight Plus and build a promotion around there that's really had a success. The Republic of Lucha, the Lucha Brothers group, was on Fight Plus before that became a big talking point, and you'd see a couple of people talk about their shows, but it was not bringing in a new audience they hadn't seen before. You could see Lucha Memories is on IWTV, and it does not, anecdotally, you don't see too many people talking about their shows afterwards, not found them in the audience. It's better than the no money they're probably getting on Mas Lucha, but is it a reasonable trade-off for making their product too obscure to draw fans from what they're doing, but they're only getting by on live attendance now to build up that audience, and they're having trouble building up that audience. No one's going to go back to doing the premium stuff, even if they're not making much money, and I really don't believe most of these are making much money. They're also not going to, it's money. They're not going to just give up money for no reason at all. Even if you can make an argument that the exposure is worth more than the money they're giving, it's still tough for them to give up money. But at this point, what foothold they have is completely reliant on the streaming networks they have. I have no idea what CML does if Ticketmaster decides that, oh yeah, there's no one using this Ticketmaster live service, we're just going to close it up and do something else. I don't know where CML pay-per-views live. I'm not sure if they do either. Same thing, Mas Lucha is relying on YouTube being a good partner, and Google is not always a good partner, and ad-driven services like that for video sometimes can be very mercurial. It can change how much money you're getting from those subscriptions, and I don't know what happens if, hopefully, YouTube goes on forever and Mas Lucha is be able to profit from forever, but they're relying on, if something happened to YouTube or YouTube changed their algorithm, they're obviously vulnerable to some sort of issues, and Fight is its own real thing. That's obviously going all in onto the Fight Plus stuff, and I don't know what that means for AAA charging for much more than what Fight Plus is offering on that same service long terms. There's a potential advantage to whoever can figure out how to mix these up, because the paid stuff's not going away, but you still need the free stuff to get people bring in, but you need to make people aware that the free stuff is there. And you need to give more advantage to the paid stuff that they're paying for, so that people say when they buy something that it's a value over just waiting 2 weeks to see it, which is the issue with both the AAA and CML shows, where if you're just patient enough, you can see most of the stuff that they're charging you for shortly afterwards. AAA has addressed this by improving their English commentary, and when the production isn't in the way. They've done a good job with that. But it's also tough to build interest in a promotion when you're only seeing 3 shows from that promotion a year, and that's the case with the English commentary right now. The CML show is just like there's no extra effort put into it beyond what you're getting on a normal live stream. They could both they could draw more people in by giving better value by, again, English commentary or some sort of bonus stuff, but they also, like, they're missing opportunity. Anyone who's buying these shows are probably very willing to, or more willing than the normal person to, like, buy a CML t-shirt or a AAA mug or something, and they don't really take advantage of those audiences to sell them more stuff that they're interested in. It's the thing I was complaining about on Twitter. It's tough to figure out which of the 100 things I was complaining about Twitter I'm talking about here, but the thing where if you are a U.S. fan of Hijo del Vikingo, you cannot buy a Hijo del Vikingo t-shirt because there's just none available, even though there are a million platforms where AAA could do that, and AAA has Hijo del Vikingo designs sitting around the computer because you can see them on the Mexican shirts when they go to shows, but they just miss the opportunity to make that direct money from those from people who might be interested in it. Sometimes these premium things, these subscription things, feel like checking out a box, but not really thinking, okay, if someone's going to be willing to pay for this, what else can we sell them? What else might they be interested in? What else can we do to hook them? And instead, they're just kind of like standalone projects that if you're already interested in AAA, if someone else has already sold you about the interest about being in the show, or you've watched another show, you can come back for this one, but you can't. There's no avenue to expand your interest or expand how much you want to support AAA from those shows. Putting all this stuff behind these paywalls also has the effect that they make these shows less valuable to work on. A lot of the appeal to working on a CML show or a AAA show is that everyone gets to see you on that, and in some way your family and friends get to see that you're a AAA wrestler, and that's a big deal. In other ways, it's like you get to sell yourself by promoters because I'm a big star because I'm on these shows everyone sees. But if they're in places where they're less visible, then less people are going to see them. It's not as huge a issue for the CML and AAA shows because they're still on TV and far more people are going to see them than any stream that anyone does at this point. But like, if your biggest matches are on a Mas Lucha paywall, then it's tougher to make to come up as a big deal from it. Like this past week, Puma de Oro, Astro Boy, and Tenali had this great match in IWRG. If you are a subscriber to Mas Lucha, you saw the match and it was a great match. And if you're not a subscriber, it's worth going to their channel and giving them the $8 or whatever it is to sign up and watch that match. But the difference between them doing that in front of, let's say, 300 fans who subscribe to the show and watch the show, and the 100,000 who might have watched it either live or after the fact, if it was a free show like past IWRG big shows have been in past years, is gigantic for those guys, for people being interested in them. If you saw the match, those guys came off like guys you'd want to book on your show or go pay a ticket to go see, but not as many people saw them because they were behind the paywall. And while Mas Lucha does have like clips and highlights, it does not resonate the same way as seeing a whole match. So wrestlers may have to figure that in, is like, where am I going to put my best effort into if I want to use this as a stepping stone to go someplace else. A fourth big story is, after I drink something here, AAA has also made some changes in how they're running things. I think this is more gradual evolution than something that just happened this one year, and you can even see it in years past. But in my mindset, and this is from the outside, is that COVID kind of refocused what they wanted to, where they wanted to get their revenue from, or where they were going to try to get their money from. Like pre-COVID, AAA ran 1 or 2 Triple Manias. Those are shows they promoted themselves. And most everything else was like leasing out the wrestlers for TV tapings or for spot shows and making money off that, making money off what portion of the gates they got, but more the conventional wrestling business in Mexico. After COVID, they lost a year where that was just impossible to do because no one was running shows. And even these last couple of years, those local promoters have been slow to return, or just not running as often, or not bringing in as many people. It could be that their business was damaged, or they suffered their own personal loss. But that both the instability of losing that revenue stream and it being slow to return seems like it's encouraged AAA to go more in a direction where instead of dealing with a local promoter in different places, they're focused more on trying to establish more long-term business relationships that are less vulnerable to crazy things happening like COVID, or like just like say not drawing as well for wrestling because of whatever's going on, or the peaks and valleys of promoting wrestling, where sometimes things aren't on and sometimes they are, and you can only so much control that. We've seen them just like increase their business-to-business relationship in this way, where they're running an increasing number of sold shows, like the show center shows they run in Monterey, where AAA wanted those shows to do well, but like it seemed like more they had a partnership to run an X amount of shows, and for a certain amount, and they would supply the wrestlers and make sure they were up to a certain quality of standards, and they would run a tournament to make it a big deal, but they weren't as dependent on the show doing good or the show going bad about how the agreement was going to work out. And they ran more shows at malls that kind of worked in the same way. They also ran 3 Triple Manias and also this 4th show coming up in Acapulco, where they're running bigger shows with themselves more involved with them, but with a bigger chance to benefit from them because they were running bigger buildings than they've run in the past for these Triple Manias than they would run for like a Veranda Scandalo or other B-tier shows. They've also increased their partnerships with like companies like Marvel, where they were doing it the last couple of years, but this year's the big payoff where they're getting the show on Disney Plus, and the Lucha Titan project, where they're partnering with the local government about doing a kind of a tourist dinner show kind of thing, where they are supplying the wrestling intelligence and helping create the performance, but they are not like responsible for building the place or building the venue where it's going to happen, or taking care of some of the day-to-day operations. They are more like just handling the wrestling operations while someone else is handling the business operations and getting paid for it, but also not as taking much risk if it doesn't work out, because it's not completely their investment. It's less vulnerable to, when you have those kind of relationships, it's like less vulnerable if things just don't work out. If the business if an angle doesn't work, or you're missing that big hot star, it doesn't matter as much if you've already sold the show ahead of time. And I think the strategy worked this year. It was not always to my liking, but from business standpoint, all 3 Triple Manias drew very well. The Tijuana show seemed like it outdrew what they were expecting for it. The Mexico City show seems like it was a bit of a slightly disappointment, but look, anytime you're drawing over 10,000 fans, and that seemed like what they got, it's still a profitable day. Running those many Triple Manias got people to pay attention to the promotion more often, because they've built the Triple Mania brand name enough that people know, oh, this is a show I'm supposed to care about with AAA. Especially for people who do not follow day to day otherwise, they know that Triple Mania is supposed to be a big show. It's hurt a bit by running 3 times. So, once you run it 3 times, people figure out that all these Triple Manias must not be important, because it wouldn't be happening 3 times if it was all that important. But it got on people's radars who would not have paid attention to it just because of that name. And to the point where you're kind of wondering if they're just going to start calling more things Triple Mania. The downside is it's kind of like a mini WWE problem, where it'd be great for WWE if their product, when the product is good, but the revenue streams aren't explicitly they are so built in by TV revenue and by streaming revenue with Peacock that they're not as reliant on the product being super hot. They just got to be okay, and they're going to continue making money. They can even be a little bit bad, and they're probably not going to be in too much trouble. And so there's not as much. AAA has the same things because they just need those triple manias to work, and they need to have their Disney partners be happy, the other partners be happy. That making the show actually be good week to week is not really that important to them at this point. It does not need to be that important because what they gotta get people in the seats for the triple manias, and those aren't reliant. They can build those up by just putting big matches on them without having to worry about what's all leading up to it, and it's proven to be a workable formula. It's theoretically they have more room to experiment and try for different stuff, but I think in reality it's been that they've done less because they don't need to do as more because they found that the stuff in between the triple manias is even less important. Their problem going forward is that to continue those triple manias being a big deal is that they need those big main events, those important matches that are must see, that sell themselves on name value even if you don't know anything else going on, because often to get those matches to happen it's involving people who aren't going to be available any other time except that day, and there's a limited amount of those matches you can do. It'd be great if more older Mexican wrestlers are like Volano 4 and willing to lose their mask in a big match, because that would create lots of matches for AAA, would create some matches for CMLL, but for whatever reasons, for personal reasons, for monetary reasons, it's tough to find wrestlers willing to do that. AAA will probably continue trying to bring in people from AEW. It's probably a very strong reason why the Kenny Omega Vikingo match keeps staying alive. AAA would very much like it to happen next year on one of those shows because that would take care of one main event. But there's, I think it's tough to continue going to the well of bringing a new star from AEW because availability of novelty wears off. It's challenging to create those new matches and politically to make them happen when you need whoever you bring from AEW, that's not going to be the priority for them. And we've seen with Sammy and Ty and FTR, because it's something that's got the AAA name on AEW TV on a regular basis, but it's also clearly hasn't been a priority for either side to bring them back. And AAA has not seen the value on their own shows so far from bringing those people in. At least as I assume what they thought they were going to do originally. They have not been negatives, but it's like they're not going to be the new big main event. They're not going to be even a semi. I guess FTR is a semi-main, but they're not a big drawing thing for their show so far. And it shows that you can't just pull in any act from AEW or from US TV and they're automatically going to be a big deal in Mexico. Fifth big point is I'm really thirsty. I gotta stop talking, but I have to keep talking because that's how this video works. The fifth big story of this year was the rise of Big Lucha. Big Lucha really started 2021. It's about like half a year there, half a year here. But this year was really, it became more than just like a weird, idiosyncratic Mexico indie that had a few unique people to being like a full-fledged promotion. What Big Lucha did that other people didn't do is they took advantage of a underserved market. The issue with wrestling in Mexico is that to become a national star at this point, and plenty of other points, but especially right now, you have to live in Mexico City. You can't really get into CML without eventually moving to Mexico City. You can't get into AAA really without moving to Mexico City and being based out there. But if you live any other place in the country, it's expensive. Move to Mexico City, you have no place to live. You may only have a limited amount of places to train, especially before you really get into one of those promotions. And just like making ends meet is very tough. It's a situation Bandito had talked about if you go watch his interview with Chris Hero on the High Spots Network. When he first came to Mexico City, he stayed at Ultimo Guerrero's gym, but he was also like completely broke to the point where he was months and months behind on revenue, on rent, and months behind on like the food budget they were helping him out with, and they were nice enough not to kick him out, but he was in rather bad shape and would not have made it without like people being very kind to him. And so this Big Lucha Bandito just gym setup is trying to push that forward, and that's where they found success, is that they have a place where people away from Mexico City can live in dorms for a while, they can train in the gym, and they can wrestle on their shows to get better. And that's allowed a lot of people who would not have the opportunity to come to Mexico City and try to make a living there to at least give it a shot. And that's really where they found their talent. They found guys like Exasis and Kameta Maya and other people whose name I'm blanking on, who were just kind of like, who were often smaller wrestling areas who would not get enough attention there to make it on their own, would be like kind of weekend warriors, or maybe they wrestle 2 or 3 times a month. And now they are regularly in Mexico City getting work on in Big Lucha and getting work in other promotions because they're more centrally located, and they are not so forced to make ends meet that they can't keep up training, or they can't actually find time to wrestle because they have a place to stay that's affordable. The other thing Big Lucha has done compared to other U.S. indie promotions is, like, it seems like in some groups it's a battle to see how many people you can book on a show, to the point where it's kind of really obvious that maybe not all these people working the shows are getting paid for the shows, because you can see how many people are booked and how many fans are in the stands and what the ticket prices are, and see how quickly it does not add up. With Big Lucha, because they are doing a smaller group of people, they can focus on those few people rather than just trying to fit everyone on the card, and people get more time to develop when they're in smaller matches, when they're working with similar people at similar skill level often, when they are not 8th match on the card working in a scramble, when they actually have something more substantial to work with that they can improve from week to week. And the other advantage is promotions has had guys like Skyda coming in to train, which has seemed to unlock stuff with other wrestlers and definitely add to improvements here. That's really turned Big Lucha into a place where, like, you can see a lot of young wrestlers in Mexico City and Mexico State, but most of them seem like they start out at a certain level and then they just get stuck about that same level. There's not really the investment put into developing them, because anyone who's using them is an indie promotion is just really thinking of, what do I need them for that one night, and then maybe we'll see you again in a month, but there's no real connection there beyond that. With Big Lucha, because those guys are training there together often, because they have their Big Lucha World Show, that they get more opportunities to get ring time, to improve, to figure out what they're doing wrong, and really to work on their characters, where a lot of people in Mexican wrestling have like personality, they have gimmicks, they have looks, but they really, because you're just doing like a 10-minute match or 20-minute match in the middle of a show, you really don't have time to get over your character or figure out even what your character is. You don't get promo time. Or what you do is just a quick backstage interview with that's just saying, "Oh, I'm happy I won. I'm sad I lost," but you have no real direction behind that. It's with the Big Lucha, because they have been focused on building to a big show each month, and because they've been running these smaller shows in between, you get more development time of that personality side, which a lot of guys seem like they're missing. The promotion, I mean, they're interesting because they've developed those guys, and you can see many different people have grown in the short time. The guy I have up here in the corner is a great example. Is Forneo, who was like one of 1,000 anonymous Mexico City wrestlers who you would see his name on this card. You might be able to pick out his mask if you've seen him before, but just one guy, just a face in the crowd. He just did not stand out in any way. Big Lucha brought him in to be part of a heel group. They made him the leader, and they gave him time to kind of work on a heelish, arrogant personality that's really developed him into a more interesting wrestler. And then they've give him chances to have singles matches that he was not getting to have on that you're not going to really have in a show designed for families or designed for just to fit everyone on, where he's been able to show his skills as a wrestler and then improve constantly. He's There are bigger names who've come through Big Lucha, but I think Forneo, as a guy who just went from an anonymous wrestler to a guy who has a distinct personality, has impressive matches, and has grown into a character, I think is one of their bigger success stories so far. It's a guy who's now getting more high-profile bookings outside of Big Lucha than he was when he was started, which is like the goal of the whole project. There are guys like Bandito and Elemental and Utani, who were just a soccer player who did not work out as a soccer player and got trained in wrestling and has rapidly developed into an interesting wrestler on his own that would be like at most like have a couple interesting matches in the scramble match, but now you can kind of get a sense of them because they've gotten more time and more reps with the setup that Big Lucha is doing. And by the end of the year, you could see that other promotions were kind of bringing them in because they saw that these guys had something and that people were paying more attention to them and they wanted some of that attention for themselves. So that's like the best sign that you're actually doing something good, is that people want to borrow that little buzz for themselves, and that was going on especially during the fall. They still have, they're not a perfect promotion. I don't want to give you that impression. Like, because you're focusing on so many young people who are not complete wrestlers at this point, there's like matches that do not work. There are guys who are still trying to figure out what they're doing or just have not clicked at their characters yet. It's what you expect for a developmental promotion, but so there's no danger to be competing with New Japan on shows or AEW on shows or WB on shows. But the fact that you can see that the improvement there makes it a more pleasurable watch, but they still have a ways to go till they really have a complete roster of like great guys. And there are people who come and people who go, and they need to keep attracting waves of interested people to keep building up that roster. They also need to figure out what they're going to do with their top of the card, because this is a promotion that from day one has been a Bandito versus Flamita feud with other people mixing in, with team members mixing in. And Mexican fans have much more patience for those kind of long-running feuds. See Fuerza Guerrero and Octagon. But at some point, it's going to get old. To me, it may have already gotten old. They need to find a way to mix different people in there or to go different directions. And because those two guys are going to be probably in the promotion as long as they want, it's going to be a challenge to keep them both busy and also working in, but not always against each other. And I don't think they've really... I think if we're still talking about them feuding a lot this time next year, it's going to probably be a bad sign for the growth of the promotion. And also you have to figure out how they're going to handle Bandito being in AEW. Clearly he has not been in AEW all that much as I'm talking, but eventually that might take him away from this promotion a bit. And even though they're not running a big schedule and that Bandito does not wrestle more than a dozen times for them a year, maybe more closer to 20, that's still like their biggest name, and their biggest name might not be around. The upside is that, like, I'm sure in their dream world they can borrow a couple people from AEW who aren't doing much and bring them in, and that would be big deals for their shows. There's also, like, you probably didn't watch it if you're watching this video, but they just ran like the Big Lucha Awards like last week, and you could see everyone there was like Technos, Rudos, everyone who showed up was having a great time. The spirit's really good. Everyone seems like they get along great. And that's really nice to see. But you also kind of wonder, these are going to be the times that everyone's going to remember as like some great times they had. But are they going to all be together and happy if they're all in the same places a year from now? Maybe they will be, but they have to find a way to like give chances to some of the bigger promising guys to move up the cards or have different matches, because people quickly get tired of doing the same thing over and over again, and they have to find a way to continually to shake things up, to move people up, to give chances while not frustrating the people who are already there who want to do more. So that's like the more you grow, that's a bigger challenge just to keep everyone happy. Some of they've drawn well on their monthly shows by bringing in outside wrestlers, and some of them have worked out well. Some of them have not got great performances, and just figuring out which ones are the ones that are going to work, or when they can get to the point where they don't need to rely on having those outside guests as much to be drawing people, not even like as their own that they're drawing, but to create new matchups. When they can, it'll be a big turning point for them when they can regularly rely just on their own roster and less on bringing the guests of the month in some cases. They still have not put together that one great show from beginning to end. But again, their developmental promotion, they're going to have, the point of the promotion is that you have rookie guys. You have guys who are just not that experienced. You have people who are still figuring out and who may never figure out. But you kind of like to say, you want the one show to point to everyone to point to is this is the one show you should check out to see if you want to understand Big Lucha. And I'm not sure really they've had that show. They've had like Flamita versus Bandito matches that have been great, but you've also, like, if you're a person looking to check out Big Lucha, there's like plenty of other times you could have seen the Flamita versus Bandito match. They're looking for the signature, this is what makes Big Lucha different from everyone else show. And I don't think they've quite got there yet. And the other thing is, for most international fans, they think of this as a promotion where Travis Banks worked once because Bandito didn't know what was going on, and the second time because Bandito and possibly other people were trying to hide him under a mask. And that's always what they're going to think of both Big Lucha and Bandito. And if you follow Lucha Libre, if you follow Mexican wrestling generally, Travis Banks and people like Travis Banks are so omnipresent that it does not feel like the fact that Big Lucha eventually, too late, but eventually stopped using him feels like a positive in their favor because you see everyone else is still using him even after seeing that reaction. But that doesn't erase what happened, and it's also tough to, like, that's the first impression people have, or in a lot of people, the only impression they have of Big Lucha. So creating some sort of interest in the promotion beyond that is always going to be a challenge until they give them something else to look at. And I don't know how you get people over that, because reasonably people may still, it doesn't take much for people to just kind of cross promotions or people off and move on. And it's very hard to get people uncross them. So, I mean, it sucks, but it's their mistake. It feels like one that they have apologized and corrected from, but, that doesn't really fix it. So, and it's unclear whatever will fix it. The last thing I want to get to, because it's late and because I'm running out of oxygen, is that the parent for both promotions to be push the patriotism, nationalism aspect this year. If you listen to enough Tony Khan interviews, you can, without thinking, do the speech or retell the story he tells every time about when they almost got shut down in Georgia and what percentage of wrestlers he had access to that he had to build 7 weeks of TV with. I believe the number is 27%. I'm not going back to check. But like every wrestling promoter, every CEO, every person who's like gives a lot of speeches has a few stories that they go to. And for Tony Khan, it's definitely we had to get TV out and we only had a certain percentage of wrestlers that he's told many, many times. And for Jordan Roldan, that story is becoming his pitch about AAA and Lucha Libre, that the three most Mexican things are sombreros, tequila, and Lucha Libre. Those are the three biggest parts of Mexican identity. And this year, it's not just a talking point, it's something that they've kind of, both AAA and CML have totally pushed their way into. AAA has made partnerships with made in Mexico brands like Charlie, the jerseys, Pan Am shoes, Zolos de Tijuana for the Triple Main Tijuana show, the Monterrey baseball team for their shows. They are working again with the government on the Lucha Titan project for Cancun. And even when they're trying to go with the U.S., it's all about talking about it's not like they're trying to make a U.S. promotion or make a U.S. style thing. They want to make a specific Mexican. They want to take their specific Mexican style promotion and bring it to the U.S. for Mexican fans and people interested in Mexican culture. It's very much they want to do business with Mexico. They want to represent Mexico, and they want Mexico to look at AAA as a representation of them in other places. CML, same thing. They've been working closely with the national government on sports diplomacy and tourism projects, including like the recent Copa Bicentennial, where that was very clearly something that the Mexican government had thought up as a way to celebrate 200 years of relationships with the U.S. And they've done other similar projects through the year. They push the idea that they are integral part of Mexico City's tourism industry, where Arena Mexico is a mandatory stop if you're a Mexican tourist, and that Lucha Libre is an integral part of Mexico City. At the Lucha Titlan press conference for AAA, I think it was the local state governor who pushed the idea that there was a resolution passed that said that the Lucha Libre was a part of Mexico City's culture, and they wanted to extend that to say an official proclamation that Lucha Libre is a necessary and integral part of all of Mexico's culture. Japan seems like they respect the wrestling a lot. U.S. not as much, but in Mexico it's like a higher identification between Mexico and wrestling, and the promotions involved are completely embracing that they want that part of that. They want that identity to be even stronger because they feel like it brings them up as well. That becomes a thing to look for 2023, because WB every so often, and increasingly in the last few months, has made talks about we'd like to get into other countries, and Mexico, if not Latin America in general, but definitely Mexico, comes up as a place where they might get involved. And in a culture, in a moment where both promotions are pushing that they're 100% pure Mexicano, a company coming in saying, oh yeah, we're going to bring it U.S. style, is going to have challenges doing that. And even more so if like they're a company that's saying we're going to come into Mexico by buying one of the 100% Mexico promotions, might face some pushback for doing that. I think at the end of the day, the promotions themselves, if they've got the right offer, they're not as worried about being a Mexican as much as they'd be happy to take the paycheck, to pay the big check to let everything go. And I think a lot of the wrestlers themselves look at WB as the major leagues. So even if signing with the WB meant you were actually signing with an NXT Mexico and like 5 steps away from actually making to WrestleMania, just having that sort of association would be a huge deal to them, and more wrestlers than you would expect would just happily jump over to a WWE Mexico if given the opportunity. It's really going to be more of an issue of would the fans not even like the CML hardcore fans or AAA hardcore fans, but the casual fans who see Lucha Libre as something that is Mexican, how would they react to a U.S. company owning something that is so Mexican? I mean, that's happened in other industries and other places where things are part of a national identity bought by some other nation. But there's definitely going to be a challenge to convince people that those sort of things would be a positive move for their own enjoyment and not something that's being taken away from them. It may even face some sort of government, like small chance. I don't want to overplay this. Like the smallest chance that like if WWE suddenly owned Arena Mexico, would the Senate a few blocks away feel like this is some sort of infringement on their identity in the way they didn't want and get involved? I think it's almost not the wrestling industry that would have a problem with WWE coming in as like the man on the street who might see this as some sort of offense to what they think of what Mexico should be that I would be concerned about if I was WWE coming into the market. Wow, I spelled quiet wrong. That's embarrassing. The other thing we're going to see is that both companies are going to continue to compete to try to be the most Mexican company. Or where in the U.S. you might see arguments over which is the bigger company by crowd sizes or ratings, and crowd sizes maybe again in Japan. With Mexico, because they're running such different business models, it does not seem like crowd sizes seems like a fair way to do it, because they're running different buildings. They're just running different ways, from like one promotion running Mexico City in a big way once a year and another one running it 200 times a year. So it's just, you can compare them, but they're apples and oranges almost that way. The closest you can compare them is like they're both battling for being the identity of wrestling in Mexico. That when you tell someone to close their eyes and think of lucha libre, what do they think of first is what they're really battling for. The CML people want them to think of Arena Mexico. The AAA people want them to think of a Psycho Clown match or something crazy happening at Triple Mania. I think the reality is that a lot of people, what they see in their head might be Santo, and Santo's not present in either promotion. And it would be obviously a big deal for either group to get him to go to endorse them, but also Hijo del Santo hates both promotions, so that's kind of an issue. But that's also kind of what makes Mexico what it is that wrestling is not necessarily one promotion or belonging to a promotion. It can be an independent group or a street show or something else. And while they both are trying to become while both AAA and CML are trying to become both the place where someone trying to spend money on lucha libre spends their money, there's also a larger identity than what any one promotion can be, and it makes anyone becoming the default being a huge challenge to accomplish. Those are my 6 points. I don't know if any of this made sense. I just talked a lot. My throat hurts. This is all a mistake. But if you somehow found this video and didn't find my Twitter, I guess you can find my Twitter. Maybe Twitter's dead by the time I post this. Who knows? We could all be that lucky. I also have a website that gets updated Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and maybe I'll think of doing the match of the year list. But for now, this is me stopping talking because I'm hearing my voice too much. If you have any feedback, give me any thoughts. If you have any ideas of stories I should have come up with, thoughts on like me missing the point on some of these stories, just leave in the comments below. Follow up on Twitter, or just send the mail in the post office with an imaginary address, and I'll find it somehow. Thanks for listening, and I will do this again, maybe never.